الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Yesterday we started reading Surah al-Muddathir. In the ayahs we read today, we read at the beginning of the surah the commandments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to His Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then we read ayahs in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned another man who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had been gracious to and showered him in luxury, yet he was unfaithful. And in the ayahs we read, in the beginning there are these commandments that we read that were addressed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and afterwards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to leave this man who has the following description, leave him to me. Part of the meaning of that is you don't have to get into a fight with him. You're not responsible for taking him to account. But also, part of the meaning of this is beware of that example. Live up to these commandments and don't be like this. This message as explicit, if you read Surah al-Duha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that surah, in this surah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about a man who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had been very faithful to him and had taken great care of him and given him everything, and he responded to that with obstinance and ingratitude. In Surah al-Duha, there is a message addressed to the Prophet ﷺ himself, which is not different. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in that surah, Surah al-Duha, أَلَمْ يَجِدْكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى. Didn't He find you an orphan and took you in? وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى. And He found you lost and He saved you. وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى. And He found you poor and He made you rich. The message in that surah afterwards is to be the opposite of what is described, what we read is described in this surah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you be faithful, have hope in Him, is the message in the beginning of the surah, and be faithful to Him and live in His cause. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but you do good. فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ. Don't harm the orphan. Don't turn away someone who asks you. And talk about the gift of your Lord. And the message in that last ayah, talk about the gift of your Lord, is another aspect of قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ. رَبَّكَ وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. That's another aspect of that commandment. And in the next surah as well, Surah al-Inshirah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the beginning of that surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded the Prophet ﷺ of some of his blessings, some of his gifts to him. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, commanded him to be faithful and take those, what he was given, and do good with them. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no. فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ. And that is another aspect of وَلَا تَمْنُنْ تَسْتَكْثِرْ. إِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ. Whenever you are free, continue to work. وَإِذَا رَبِّكَ فَارْغَبْ. Those two ayahs are another aspect of وَلَا تَمْنُنْ تَسْتَكْثِرْ وَلِرَبِّكَ فَاصْبِرْ. Now, we talked about the last ayahs we read yesterday. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described, there's an admonition in these ayahs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described an unfaithful person. And according to the books of Sirah and history, these ayahs were revealed about a particular person who was, who? Al-Walid ibn Mughira. And again, it's very important to understand that the lesson here is not just to put down that particular individual. His name isn't mentioned. It's these traits, this description, that is an admonition for us. It was an admonition for the Prophet ﷺ himself, and it's an admonition for everyone who reads these words. And like some of the Mufassirin say, the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned is the person I created all alone. That applies to that man, Al-Walid ibn Mughira, and it applies to every single person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described this person as being, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had pampered him, had given him everything, and instead of him responding, instead of him responding to those gifts and that graciousness by saying, how can I honor the Lord who gave all of this to me? How can I serve Him? How can I glorify Him? How can I come closer to Him? He responded to that by contrariness, by stubbornness, by actually fighting against being faithful. And when he was heard words from his Lord that called him to serve the one who gave him all of these gifts, he fought against it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّهُ كَانَ لِآيَاتِنَا عَنِيدًا. They say in the books of the Sirah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ayahs that we'll read now describes how he was obstinate and stubborn and how he fought with himself. He fought with himself against being faithful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the books of Sirah, there are different versions of exactly what led up to this. There are some narrations that, according to some narrations, they said that Al-Walid ibn Mughira would visit Abu Bakr or some of the Muslims, some of the believers, and it's as if he started to become sympathetic, and then Abu Jahl taunted him and said, we're thinking about starting up a fund for you because you're visiting these other people. It looks like you're hungry and you're visiting them because you want them to feed you. You're poor. So we're thinking about starting up like a fund to help you out. You look like you're in need. And so he couldn't accept that embarrassment and not being number one, or anyone thinking that he was not, number one. So he thought of something to say to make it obvious to everyone that no, he wasn't following anyone, and he hadn't accepted this faith, to repudiate that accusation that supposedly Abu Jahl made about him. And some other narrations, according to some other narrations, all of the leaders of Quraysh got together. They wanted to figure out something to say to the other tribes, because when they came for the Hajj to Mecca, when they came to Mecca, they wanted some way to explain the Prophet ﷺ to them, because Quraysh were looked at as the special people. They were looked at as the holy people among the Arabs, and now from their standpoint, there was one from among them who was saying that all of the gods they worshipped were false, and he was, according to them, he was condemning the religion of their ancestors and putting them down. They needed some kind of way to explain that to the Arabs who came during the Hajj to maintain their status among the Arabs. And so he thought of something to say, or some way to explain away the message that he heard from the Prophet ﷺ. Regardless, that's not critical, the details of what led up to it. What's critical is the description that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described here, and the admonition that we see in the description in this surah. Now, continue to read. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in one of the ayahs we read yesterday, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّهُ كَانَ لِآيَاتِنَا عَنِيدًا. He was very, hostile to our words, to our message. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was faithful to him and pampered him and was always there for him. But when he heard words from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he didn't respond with faithfulness, he responded with hostility. He fought against accepting faith. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that stubbornness and that obstinance and that hostility in the ayahs that follow. And it seems that he fought against his own self. And they say, in those different narrations, they all agree that he had difficulty in trying to explain away the words he was hearing from the Prophet ﷺ. He knew he couldn't call them poetry, because he heard all kinds of poetry. This isn't poetry. He couldn't call the Prophet ﷺ a madman, because he's obviously sane. He couldn't say this is a soothsayer, because this is no one's going to fall for that. So he had to think hard of some kind of excuse to avoid accepting faith. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described that in these ayahs that follow. Continue. Continue. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in these ayahs, again, in those narrations from the seerah, they said that he thought about saying this, but then he realized that wouldn't work. He thought about this excuse or this response, he realized that wouldn't work. And he kept on thinking of things to say or excuses for accepting faith. Those details aren't important. What is that we can learn a lesson from, or can take a warning from, is that he had to fight against himself in order to escape accepting faith. That shows the level of his obstinance. He recognizes the truth, but he is willing to put up a fight and do what he can, put up effort to avoid being faithful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّهُ فَكَّرَ وَقَدَّرَ. He thought and he weighed. What can I say? How can I escape this? How can I oppose this? It's not easy the first time. He's putting an effort into it. إِنَّهُ فَكَّرَ. فَكَّرَ means to think, and qaddar means to measure. Like we say in English, to weigh something, to weigh between two different options. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَقُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ ثُمَّ قُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ. they translate that as confound him, how he weighed things. Confound him, how he weighed things. The word qutil, it's like a curse. It's like the way they translate it in English, confound him, except people don't say that anymore in English. But it's like, it's a very powerful way of saying he put a lot of effort, an unbelievable amount of effort in doing something evil. And he did it again and again. He put a lot of time and effort in weighing how to be obstinate. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ثُمَّ نَظَرَ. And nadar is another kind of mental process. Sometimes the word nadar, it means to look. And sometimes it means to consider. Sometimes it means to consider, like the ministers of Bilqis said to her. Yes, she said, فَنَاظِرَةٌ فَنَاظِرَ. That's like waiting there.
Yeah.
But the minister said then, فَانْظُرِ مَاذَا تَأْمُرِينَ. And you consider what you're going to tell us to do. And use your judgment. And all of these words describe then the different ways he was looking to turn his back and be obstinate. All of these different mental processes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him, he used them to avoid faith. He thought and he weighed things deeply and he considered. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ثُمَّ عَبَسَ وَبَسَرَ. Then he scowled and grimaced. This is, and the meaning of these words, abasa, ubus is to frown, basically. And basar is like to squint. And abasa is with your mouth, and basar is with your eyes. But what the eyes indicate is that it was hard. He had to put a lot of work in it. He was, the image from that ayah, and someone scowling and grimacing, someone is putting a lot of effort and a lot of thought into what they're doing. And this answer, and it reminds you of the hadith the Prophet ﷺ said, the meaning of the hadith is, no one is more faithful in the face of provocation than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His servants disobey him and they worship others, but despite that he continues to take care of them and provide for them. It's the meaning of the hadith. And the ayahs remind you of the example of that hadith. Now, then after all of that effort he put into it, and he didn't succeed at coming to a conclusion, he just ran away. It's as if adbara wastakwa. Adbara means to turn your back and flee. It's like a word that indicates cowardice. And all that effort he didn't, and he find a successful solution to his dilemma. He just escaped it. He acted arrogant. He pretended like he was proud, even though he knows what he's saying is wrong. Continue.
فقال إن هذا إلا سحر يؤثر إن هذا إلا قول البشر.
And he said, and this wasn't the result of his effort. His efforts failed. He said this out of arrogance, even though he knows it's wrong, out of stubbornness and obstinance. He said, this is just sorcery that was passed down, or has been, that was learned from someone else. إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا قَوْلُ الْبَشَرِ. This is just the words of that human. The word bashar, it means what? It means a human being. And a human being as opposed to like an angel, or opposed to a different type of creature. This word, it can be singular and it can be plural. In Surah Yusuf, there are many examples of this in the Quran. For example, in Surah Yusuf, the women, when they saw Yusuf, they said, مَا هَذَا بَشَرًا. This isn't a human being. That's in a singular sense. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَكُم مِّن تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ إِذَا أَنْتُمْ بَشَرٌ تَنْتَشِرُونَ. One of His signs is that He created you from dust, and behold, you are human beings spread out far and wide. The meaning of Allah, the meaning of this ayah could be the plural, or it could be the singular. And if it's the singular, it means it's referring to the Prophet ﷺ. And the meaning of al-bashar is that person. And these aren't the words, these aren't holy. Well, that's what he's claiming. They're not divine, or they're just the words of that human. Or they are just the words of min. Allahu A'lam. Continue.
سأصليه سقر فما أدراك ما سقر.
Now, in the previous ayahs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described Him as being hostile to His words, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned Him that He will put him through an ordeal. In the ayahs we just read, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us how He was hostile towards His words. And in these ayahs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the ordeal that He will be put through. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, سَأُصْلِيهِ سَقَرٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I will burn him in saqar. The word saqar, it's a proper name. It's a proper name like Jahannam. That's linguistically, that's why it has a fatha. One fatha at the end of it. It's a proper name. But Allah Alam, it has a meaning too. The Mufassirin say it has to do with, there's a basis for this in the language as well. It has to do with burning anger, burning and rage. This name, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it in Surah al-Qamar as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّ الْمُجْرِمِينَ فِي ضَلَالٍ وَسُعُرٍ يَوْمَ يُسْحَبُونَ فِي النَّارِ عَلَى وُجُوهِهِمْ ذُوقُوا مَسَّ سَقَرٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that the day they will be dragged in the fire on their faces. Taste the touch of saqar. That the punishment described in that ayah is is punishment and humiliation. And it may be related to the word sajar, which means to burn as well. There's an ayah in Surah Al-Ghafir. ثُمَّ فِي النَّارِ يُسْجَرُونَ. ثُمَّ فِي النَّارِ يُسْجَرُونَ. Sajar, it means to light something up on fire. But it apparently also means not just burning on fire, but burning with passion. Burning with hatred. And this is a fitting recompense for someone who was given luxury and ease and status and popularity, and responded with the hostility and the obstinance that he responded with. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, سَأُصْلِيهِ سَقَرْ, I will burn him in saqar. This, the meaning of saqar, wallahu, it's like in Surah al-Mulk, تَكَادُ تَمَيَّزُ مِنَ الْغَيْظِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the fire, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of us from that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described it's bursting with rage. It's bursting with rage. And the punishment, it's not passive. It's not passive. It's passionate and active. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا سَقَرْ. What could what could let you understand? How could you understand what saqar is? This expression, after this expression, مَا أَدْرَاكَ, there is always a description. But we understand from this expression that the description is, and the reality is far above that description. It's far beyond what you can picture. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, how can you understand what saqar is? Continue.
لا تبقي ولا تذر لواحة للبشر عليها 19.
Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described saqar in the ayahs that follow, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described it as words that indicate rage. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لا تبقي ولا تذر. It spares, it doesn't hold back. It doesn't hold back, and it doesn't spare anything. It doesn't hold back and doesn't spare anything. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described in Surah al-Mulk, لَا تَكَادُ تَمَيَّزُ مِنَ الْغَيْظِ. And it's bursting with rage. It doesn't hold back anything. It doesn't leave anything untouched. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لَوَّاحَةٌ لِلْبَشَرِ. The meaning of lawah is from the verb lah yaluh. That means to make something like, what's that?
Obvious or clear?
No, that's a different meaning. That word has two different meanings. This word it means to make something like to wear something out, to make something emaciated. They use this word a lot when talking about animals, and if you want to see what the word means, if you ever seen like a zebra, or when they're in a drought, and they're like skinny, and they look like they're or like a person in a famine, how they look skinny and bony and worn out. That is what happens when somebody is that's the effect of this word. They use it often to talk about animals. لاحه الصيف واضطراد وإشفاق على سقطة كقوس الضال. That was Aisha talking about a wild donkey, and he said he was burnt out or worn out by the drought in the summer, and by being hunted and having to take care of his the female donkey. He said that he was described as being it wore him out. That's the meaning of this. The word in this ayah. Saqar, it doesn't give humans it doesn't give its victims, if you will, it doesn't give them any break, it doesn't give them any rest, it doesn't take pity on them. It wears them out. Some of the Mufassirin say that the meaning of bashar here is another meaning of bashar too.
Skin.
Bashar means bashar like bashara. It means like skin. Wallahu a'lam. Even though a lot of the Mufassirin say that, it appears from the word bashar is in this word 3 times. Is in this surah 3 times. The other 2 times they both mean human. Also, the way that this word is used, la hayaluh, it always applies to the creature, not a part of the creature. Allah. So, for both those reasons, it would appear that the meaning of this is that it wears out the human who is doomed for that fate. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us all from that. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, عَلَيْهَا تِسْعَةَ عَشَرَ. It is, over it are 19. Over it there are 19. The meaning of this is, now there are 19 guards over it. There are 19 guards over this fire. There's no escape. Now, the next ayah, they say in the Tafsir that Abu Jahl, he heard, this previous ayah was read to him, he heard the previous ayah, and he made some sarcastic comments about there are 19, well, we can easily take on 19 people. And you see that the response of some of the Arabs in their Jahiliyyah was to treat the warnings in the Quran like the threats from another poet, threats from a poet, like people who say, we're going to do this. Some of the Arabs who were in that Jahiliyyah, it's as if their response to the warnings in the Quran were like they would respond to a tribe challenging them. And it's not due to a lack of any intelligence, but to إنها لا تعمل الأبصار ولكن تعمل القلوب التي في الصدور. But it's the hardness of the hearts. Abu Jahl, they say, when he heard this ayah, he responded to this ayah. He made this sarcastic remark. Only 19, and we have, all of our forces are much bigger than that. It's no problem for us. And they say after that, the next ayah was revealed. Continue, Haditha.
وما جعلنا أصحاب النار إلا ملائكة وما جعلنا عدتهم إلا فتنة للذين كفروا ليستيقن الذين أوتوا الكتاب ويزداد الذين آمنوا إيمانا ولا يرتاب الذين أوتوا الكتاب والمؤمنون وليقول الذين في قلوبهم مرض والكافرون ماذا أراد الله بهذا مثلا كذلك يضل الله من يشاء ويهدي من يشاء وما يعلم جنود ربك إلا هو وما هي إلا ذكرى للبشر.
In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا جَعَلْنَا أَصْحَابَ النَّارِ إِلَّا مَلَائِكَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if someone made the remark that was made, that this would be easy for us to take on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the meaning of this is not what you're thinking about. This is something different entirely. These 19 of these are not like 19 of you people. وَمَا جَعَلْنَا أَصْحَابَ النَّارِ إِلَّا مَلَائِكَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we have made the guards of the fire angels. We have appointed over to guard the fire anyone but angels, not the people that you are, not people like you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described them in Surah Al-Tahrim as غِلَاظٌ شِدَادٌ لَا يَعْصُونَ اللَّهَ مَا أَمَرَهُمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. Stern and fierce, they don't disobey anything that their Lord commands them, and they do as they're told. And they're strong, powerful, and they don't take pity on their subjects. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said they are angels. One angel would have been enough. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا جَعَلْنَا عِدَّتَهُمْ إِلَّا فِتْنَةً لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. But we have only made them, this number, as to torment those who were unfaithful. The meaning of Allah and the meaning of fitna in this ayah is like the meaning of fitna in Surah Al-Buruj. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ فَتَنُوا الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَتُوبُوا. Those who persecute or torture the faithful men and women. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described that persecution in the beginning of the surah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَقَاتِلُوهُمْ حَتَّى لَا تَكُونَ فِتْنَةً وَيَكُونَ الدِّينُ لِلَّهِ. Fight them until there is no fitna, until there is no persecution. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالْفِتْنَةُ أَشَدُّ مِنَ الْقَتْلِ. Torture or persecution is worse than killing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Tur, يَوْمَ هُمْ عَلَى النَّارِ يُفْتَنُونَ ذُوقُوا فِتْنَتَكُمْ. That the meaning of then taste your torment, your punishment. That's the meaning of fitna in this ayah. And one would have been enough, but they are in this number. That is an extra torment, an extra disgrace for those who were unfaithful. Now, if we can stop right here for 1 second.
Stop?
No, not that kind of. This is a little bit of a different subject, but if you remember yesterday, I mentioned there was a person who died while reading the surah. Remember?
Yeah.
There was a man. Has anyone heard that before? There was a man named Zurara ibn Awfa. Zurara ibn Awfa. He was, he lived in the first century after Hijrah. He's a narrator of ahadith, some of his ahadith are in all 6 books of Sunnah. He was the Qadi of Basra. He was the judge of the city of Basra. Where is Basra? In Iraq. As in the year 93, he went one morning to lead the Salat al-Fajr in a masjid in Basra. They call it the Masjid Bani Qushayr. He started reading Surah al-Muddathir, and when he reached this ayah, فَإِذَا نُكِرَ فِي النَّاقُورِ, he dropped down dead in Salah. There was a man named, another well-known narrator of hadith named Bahaz ibn Hakim. He said, I was there, and I was part of his janazah. That story is, makes you stop in and of itself. But the reason, I mentioned that story right now, is because it helps us understand part of the meaning of these ayahs. Not the content of the story, but just the fact that I told the story. If you remember, me saying something yesterday, and that there was a person who such and such happened to him, there's a difference between me telling you that and me telling you all of these details. There's a big difference. between me just telling you that jinn, there once was a person this happened with them, and me telling you all of those details. There's a huge difference. Yani, it's much more clear in your mind, it's much more potent when you know all of those other facts. Just yani, the story in a general way, by our nature, if we hear a story like that, we may not pay attention in the first place. Somebody may even say, well, he wasn't really serious about that, or he wasn't literal, or I'm not sure about that. But when you hear all those details, there's a difference between hearing it in a general way and hearing it in a detailed way. It goes back to the meaning and what follows in this ayah. In the previous scripture, in this scripture, the words that were revealed to Muhammad ﷺ, there is much more detail about the hereafter than there is in any of the previous scriptures. There are warnings and descriptions of paradise and of the fire. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the first and save us from the latter. There are much more vivid descriptions in this scripture than there are in any previous scripture. And the previous, the followers of earlier prophets, they differed regarding their faith in the hereafter. First of all, they didn't know, they weren't told a lot of details, isn't anywhere near as much as was revealed to our Prophet ﷺ, and they differed. Some of the Jews didn't believe in the hereafter at all. And there's a passage in one of the Gospels where Jesus ﷺ is arguing with one of these groups of Jews and debates with him about this point. That particular sect of Jews, they didn't believe in the hereafter. They didn't believe in the resurrection in the first place. And still, the groups, many of the followers of the previous prophets, they have different opinions or different beliefs in the hereafter. The descriptions and the warnings in this book that was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ remove that uncertainty. They remove any ambiguity that may have been there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the meaning of this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we made that number as a part of the punishment of the unfaithful. And the word here, and the lam here in this word, liyastaqim, this is what they call lam al-aqibah. It doesn't mean that that's the reason. It means this resulted. This is what it resulted. And when these words were revealed, it had different results for different people. These same words, they were a blessing for some people, an admonition for some people, and some people took them and made them even worse than they were before. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, because of these words, the warning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described, the detail that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described in the previous